Necron Stratagems 8th edition. What ones are the best? Time for another Necron review.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, in today's Necron video, we are going to take a closer look at the Necron Stratagems from the new Codex. Now, many are saying that the Necron Codex is only competitive because of our stratagems. The stratagems certainly are very powerful. We're going to take a look at those stratagems in a minute. But before that, I want to talk about list building using the stratagems themselves. Okay, so when it comes to list building, what a lot of people will do is they will build their list around the stratagems. And indeed, if you talk to competitive players, that is what a lot of them do. They start with their stratagems and they build their list, their synergy around their stratagems. Now, arguably, that is a very good way to build a list. However, me being me, I like to do things differently. Okay, so whilst I do take into consideration the stratagems whilst I'm list building, I don't actually build my list around the stratagems. What I like to do is I like to build my list as a list by itself without the stratagems. I like to see if I can make my army work without those stratagems, so that when I introduce the stratagems, my army just becomes more powerful, but it doesn't necessarily rely on the stratagems. I think this is a very powerful way to build your list. If you can make your army work on the table with no stratagems, imagine how much more powerful it's going to be with the stratagems, but you're not going to be relying on those stratagems. Now, it's fair to say we do have some great stratagems, and building your list around those stratagems is definitely a great list building way to do things. So let's have a look at them. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken all 27 stratagems from the main Necron Codex and the 3 stratagems from the main rulebook. So 30 stratagems that we have to choose, and I've split them down into 5 categories. I'm going to take a look at those categories in a second. Before that though, if you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so running through the stratagems, it's quite clear that we don't have any really bad stratagems. They're all useful, however, some are more useful than others. Okay, so what I've done is I split the categories down into 5 categories. One of those categories is the Dynasty dedicated stratagems, and the others are ranging from category number 1, not that great, category number 2, situational but okay, category number 3, situational but really good, and category number 4, really good and probably almost auto-include. So let's start at the bottom of the pile with category number 1. Okay, so this is the pile of stratagems that I thought weren't that great. They're still usable, but not necessarily the best of the bunch. Now, I'm very pleased to say there's only 2 stratagems in this pile, so let's take a look at them. Okay, so the first one is Entropic Strike. Now, this is a stratagem for one of your characters, and it's 1 command point. It allows you to ignore invulnerable saves on your first attack in close combat. Now, this is where the problem lies. It's just 1 of your dice, the first dice. I think if it was all of your dice on your first round of combat, it would be a lot better. Because the trouble that you have with just 1 dice is that first of all you have to hit, and then you have to wound before it becomes effective. Okay, ignoring the vulnerable save is great, but I don't think this is really good enough to be a usable stratagem. Certainly when we've got a lot of other stratagems available to us to use our command points on. Now, the second one at the bottom of the pile is Amalgamated Targeting Data. Now, this is actually a usable stratagem if you want to play 3 Doom Scythes. So if you have a lot of Doom Scythes, you like the Doom Scythe model, then potentially this stratagem could be useful to you. But on the whole, I don't think many people will be playing 3 Doom Scythes. But if you do, you can basically sacrifice the shooting from those 3 Doom Scythes and do some mortal wounds in its place. It is very situational. You've got to get your Doom Scythes in the right place, and you have to be playing Doom Scythes. So for me, this one is at the bottom of the pile. Okay, so now we're on category number 2, which is situational, okay stroke good cards. So let's take a look at those. Okay, so we've got 6 cards in this category to take a look at. I'm going to go through these fairly quick. Now, one of the reasons why they're in this category as opposed to the next one up, which is situational, really good, is down to the units that a lot of these cards need to work with. So let's take a look at them. Okay, so the first one is Gravitic Singularity. Now this is for your obelisk models. So when you're using the Gravity Pulse, you can wound on a 4+ as opposed to a 6+. It's a pretty nice ability, however, who is using obelisks? Not many of us, because the obelisk has its own inherent problems. Now we're going to talk about different units in separate videos, but I think that's one reason why I put this in this pile as opposed to the next one up. Now the next one is Dimensional Corridor. Now this stratagem is 1 command point, the same as the one that we've just looked at. It allows you to teleport a unit across the battlefield and come out of a monolith. And once again, the issue is, will you be playing a monolith? I suppose if you are, then potentially this is useful. But let's face it, not many of us will be playing the monolith. But if you are, could be quite useful. The next one is Enhanced Invasion Beams. Now this stratagem could actually be quite useful. It allows you to set up 2 units as opposed to 1 unit out of a monolith or a night scythe from the tomb world. Now this is 1 command point. It has the potential to be quite good. However, it does have its inherent problems. Things like needing more units in reserve to use this stratagem. Then you have the turn 1 issue. You have to get your Night Scythe and your Monolith into position. Now this can be done with the Deceiver, however that's more points put in to making this stratagem work. So it's definitely a useful stratagem. Like I said, it's a situational good stratagem, not necessarily a situational really good stratagem. Okay, so the next one is Quantum Deflection. Now what this does for 1 command point is when a unit targets one of your vehicles with quantum shielding, you can play this stratagem, and then any wounds that come through, when you're rolling your quantum shielding roll, you -1 from your dice. Now this could be quite useful in negating your shielding. However, how useful is it going to be for 1 command point? I think I would rather save my command points for other better stratagems than this one. Again, usable, good, but not necessarily the best. The next one is Enhanced Reanimation Protocols, and this is a 2-point stratagem. Basically it allows you to re-roll the 1s on 1 unit when you do your RP. Now this could be very useful if you've got a big blob of warriors, maybe around a cryptic, you've got RP on a 4+, re-roll the 1s, 2 command points, probably worth it, especially if you've got the Sutek Dynasty, allowing you to get the command points back on a 5+. So it's definitely a usable stratagem, but something which I wouldn't necessarily use that often, only under certain circumstances. Now the last one in this category isn't actually from the Necron Codex, it's from the main rulebook, and that is the Counter Defense Stratagem card. Now this is 2 points. After your enemy has fought, you can play this card and then you can fight next. It is a useful stratagem under the right circumstances. I wouldn't necessarily say for the 2 command points it's the best one, but it does have potential to be used. Okay, so that is that category. Now the next category has the majority of cards in, and that's category number 3, the situational really good stratagems. So let's have a look at those. Okay, so we've got a lot of stratagems to get through, so let's go through this quite quickly. So first of all, we've got Damage Control Override. This is for your vehicles. It allows you to use the top stat line. So if you're down to a few wounds and you're using the bottom stat line, you can use this for 1 command point and be at full strength for that turn. Really, really useful card. The next one is Emergency Invasion Beams. Again, it is situational, but really, really handy if you are using a Night Scythe or a Monolith. So once your last Night Scythe or Monolith is destroyed, you can use this card for 1 command point, and then you can bring a unit which would normally be destroyed from the homeworld onto the table. Very, very useful stratagem. The next one is the Pharaoh's Will. This is for your Overlord. It's 1 command point. It allows you to use My Will Be Done or Wave of Command twice. Very powerful. The next one is Extermination Protocols. Now this is a very powerful stratagem for 1 command point. any destroyer type unit. Can reroll the hits and wounds. Wow, really good. It is only situational though, because you have to have destroyers on the table to use it. That's why it's not in the auto include category. However, very, very powerful for 1 command point. Okay, so next is adaptive subroutines. So this is for a Canoptech unit, allowing you to advance and still shoot or assault with this card for 1 command point. Very useful, mainly for wraiths, especially if you've got the Dynasty that lets you automatically advance 6 inches, and then you can assault still with this card. Again, situational for Canoptech units, but a really great stratagem. Okay, so next is another Canoptech card, Repair Subroutines. Now this is 2 command points, however, with the wraiths being as good as they are now, it's worth spending 2 command points to get some wraiths back. Basically, you give your wraiths or another Canoptech unit RP. Primarily though, this is going to be for your wraiths. Very powerful, but obviously only useful if you have wraiths in your army. Okay, so next is Cosmic Powers. Now this is for your Catan. It allows you to replace one of its powers with another power of your choice for 1 command point. Again, situational, but if you need a particular power to help target a particular unit for 1 command point, you can choose that power. And that brings me on to another stratagem for the Catan, and that's Wrath of the Catan. Now this one is 2 points. Once you've used the power, you can use this 2 command point cards, and then you can randomly select another power to use. So you do have to roll for it, you can't choose it, but under the right circumstances, doing even more mortal wounds could be quite useful, but that is 2 command points. So again, it's situational. Okay, so next we've got Judgment of the Triarch. So this card is for Triarch Praetorians, allowing you to add 1 to hit rolls in close combat and in shooting for 1 command point. If you're taking Praetorians, this is a very useful stratagem. Okay, so the last 2 stratagems in this category, we've got Self-Destruction. This is for a Scarab base. So for 1 command point, you can explode a Scarab base, and a unit within 1 inch takes D3 mortal wounds. If you've got Scarabs, this is well worth keeping an eye out to use. Pretty nice stratagem. Now lastly, we've got Dispersion Field Amplification. So this stratagem is for your Lich Guard with sword and board with a dispersion shield. Now it's 2 command points, but when an enemy unit targets your unit, you can use this, and then your dispersion shields become a 3+ invulnerable save as opposed to a 4+. Plus, when you make your invulnerable saves, if you roll any 6s, the targeting unit takes a mortal wound for each 6 that you make. So 2 command points, but if you're playing Lich Guard with sword and board, this is a really good stratagem. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the stratagems so far. We've still got more to go, but if you've got your own thoughts regarding the stratagems, then please put your comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, what you think of the stratagems. Right, let's have a look now at the auto-include stratagems. Okay, so the auto-include stratagems. Now, of course, these are still situational. When I say auto-include, what I really mean is the stratagems that really you should memorise, the stratagems which you're probably going to use quite often, the really good stratagems. So let's have a look at them. Okay, so the first one is Disruption Fields. Now this is 1 command point. It allows you to add 1 to the strength of an infantry unit in close combat. Now this could mean the difference between wounding on 5s or wounding on 4s. Now I don't necessarily think this is the best stratagem ever. However, I think it's one of those stratagems that you need to remember. It can really change the odds in close combat if you use this stratagem. So remember you have it. It's one of those stratagems which I think could easily be forgotten. So try to remember that one. Now the next one is Resurrection Protocols. So this stratagem for 1 command point lets you bring back a character after he dies on a 4+. Very useful for keeping a character alive, very useful for keeping your warlord alive. It's a 4+, it's worth using a command point to re-roll that if you need to. So that is a great stratagem to have up your sleeve. Now the next one is Solar Pulse, and this takes away your enemy's cover save for 1 command point. I think this is a very powerful stratagem, especially when you're using your minus AP guns. The next one is Dynastic Heirlooms. Now this is a multi-command card, so you can have for 1 command point 1 extra artifact, or 3 command points you can have 2 extra artifacts. Now you have to organise this in your army list stage, however this is very powerful. Personally, I like to use the Veil of Darkness in my army, and that means that I can use this card here to get other artifacts into my army, maybe one of the additional staffs for close combat. This is very useful. For 1 command point, I think it's worth using to get an extra artifact. 3 command points for 2 artifacts, I probably wouldn't go there, but 1 for 1 is actually really good. Now next we've got Command Reroll. So this is from the main rulebook, allowing to reroll 1 dice. I think we all know it. It's a very powerful stratagem, and of course an auto use. And indeed the next one is as well. That's Insane Bravery. Particularly useful for Necrons when we've got big Necron warrior blobs. 2 command points, but allows you to automatically pass your morale. And that is all the stratagems covered, with the exception of the Dynasty dedicated ones. So let's have a look at them next. Okay, so this is category number 5. This is the Dynastic Code Stratagems. So let's have a look at them. So first of all, we've got the Novok Stratagem. Now this is actually 3 command points. This is command point heavy. So at the end of the fight phase, for 3 command points you can play this stratagem, allowing 1 unit to re-assault, do its attacks again. Now this could be quite powerful, especially if you have a unit you just have to kill to get a certain amount of victory points. However, 3 command points is very expensive, especially for the Novok Dynasty. In the Novok Dynasty, you're going to be using some of those other stratagems, the ones allowing your wraiths to advance and charge. The stratagem where you can do RP on your wraiths. You want to save your command points for those. 3 command points for these? I'm not sure, it seems very expensive. Useful under the right circumstances, but a lot of command points. Now the next one is for the Necron Dynasty. This is the Translocation Crypt, which allows you to set up an infantry or a swarm unit in reserves and then basically bring them onto the battlefield up to 9 inches away. A pretty useful stratagem. Combine that with some of the other stuff that we've got, the Deceiver, the Veil of Darkness. It means that we've got a lot of movement in our army to get close to the enemy. So pretty useful. The next one is for the Sutek Dynasty, and this is Methodical Destruction. So how it works is you inflict a wound on a unit, you can use this card for 2 command points, then any other unit that shoots at it adds 1 to the hit roll. It's 2 command points, it's situational, but again, if you've got a lot more shooting to go into 1 unit to try and kill it, that could be quite a useful card. Now next we've got Talent for Annihilation, and this is for the Methodical Dynasty. This is 1 command point, and if you roll a 6 to hit, you get an extra hit roll. So very useful. Talent Annihilation, combine that with Extermination Protocols on destroyers, really useful stratagem. Now lastly we've got the Hillock Dynasty stratagem, Reclaim a Lost Empire. Now if you have a unit which is either 3 inches of an objective or didn't move the last turn, you can use this card for 2 command points and add 1 to the saving throw. So that could be very useful end of game. Save your command points if you really need to take an objective. It's going to be quite difficult to shoot a unit off the objective, especially if you're in cover with this card. Now you also get +1 attacks with this card as well. So very useful card, 2 command points. It is points heavy, but under the right circumstances could be useful. So as you can see, we've got some great stratagems there. They are all situational, which is to be expected. 8th edition is all about synergy, and learning your army is one of the key things to getting synergy in your lists. Now I've made a separate video on how to get to know your army. I'll link you up there, head on over and check it out. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, hit my icon at the end of the video to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k. Beam me up!